Well, thanks for a great introduction and a humorous one at that. It is indeed cold at St. Olaf in Minnesota. I can attest. And thank you, to everyone from Project Dialogue for bringing me here today. It's such an honor to be able to speak about something that I think about and work on every single day. So it's just wonderful to be here and share some of the ideas that I have with all of you. So I also encourage you during the presentation to, if those of you that tweet, to use the hashtag Digital Congress. We are indeed talking about digital strategy, so feel free to use that or a Twitter handle at Andrew Foxwell, so that later maybe we can aggregate some of the things that have been said and I can answer questions, etc. Or we can answer questions in person as well. But using a hashtag is a lot cooler, so let's do that. So I just want to give a little bit of a roadmap in terms of where we're going to go today. I want to first talk about where Congress has historically been in relation to technology, and then I want to talk about where the dialogue currently stands today. Before I even go further, I want to also say that my presentation is focused purely around the official side of Congress. So a lot of times when people think about politics or they think about Congress in general, they think of campaign websites or they think of campaign strategy. I'm not talking about campaign stuff at all. I'm speaking purely to the constituent representational angle on the official side of Congress that actually has a lot of rules and regulations around it. And that's sort of where my presentation is based, so just to give you an idea. And then finally, of course, I'm going to give some ideas on moving forward, improving the customer service, and it says costumer service, my apologies, and advancing the legislative dialogue. Little typo. I changed that this morning. I don't know, it didn't save, I guess. My apologies. There we go. So in early 2008, there was a presentation a report that came out from a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization called the Congressional Management Foundation, based in Washington, D.C. As we all know, 2008 was a different year for politics. It changed a lot of things and the way that we think about new media and digital strategy within politics. So this coming out on the early side of it was try to talk about what are we doing on the official side and what could we do better. The report, which also really ties to what we're talking about today, is recommendations for improving the democratic dialogue. So the first one they said was, we want to have it be a standard that we aggregate grassroots communications that are coming into Congress. So raise your hand if you've ever gotten an email saying, send this to your member of Congress. All right, great. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is mentioning we want to be able to take all the letters that you guys are sending into Congress, know that they're similar based on text algorithms and that kind of thing within a software that offices have, and then be able to easily categorize them for an office. So if I'm a legislative correspondent, which is the role that is in the House of Representatives and is within the Senate, and my job is to look at and answer your constituent mail, I want to be able to look at these and say, these 40 letters are very similar, and I want to be able to respond to these. So as an update, this has sort of happened. So it's like we're kind of there. Okay, this is a theme. We'll get to the theme. The second one is identifying the sponsoring organization and their vendor. So MoveOn.org, Right to Life organization, whatever it is, we want to be able to say this is who it's from. We know that this group of mailings are not only alike, but they are also from this organization, which is an interesting concept that actually, for those of you that are tech people in the room, is we find this out based on IP address, where they're coming from. So if they're from similar IP addresses, we know that they're the same. This, again, has sort of happened. Verifying that grassroots communications, another recommendation they had was we want to be able to verify that grassroots communications are sent from real citizens. So this is fairly difficult because the only way that we in the official side of Congress know that you are a real citizen is a voter file that comes from your state. Now, you can imagine dealing with different types of data coming from 50 different states, and the formats that those might be in, and the ways that the fields are all messed up. Not trying to hit on voter file people, if there's any vendors of those in the room, but they are sort of all over the place. So the only way we can know that you're a real person is cross-checking the database that I currently have as a member of Congress against the voter file and saying, okay, John Smith at 123 Johnson Road in my district, and John Smith, who's on my voter file, that's a real person. So again, this is a process that has sort of happened, but we're not all the way there yet. Again, getting to the first point, another recommendation is identifying the exact bill or the amendment. So if you're not only writing on a specific topic, knowing that it's on HR House Record 4859, and knowing that they're the same. And the most interesting one of these that we'll get to talking about a little bit later as well is developing an open source communication standard. So for those of you that go on a member website, may it be smith.house.gov or corker.senate.gov, as some of you may have been on, those member contact forms. It says contact me, and you click on it. If you've looked at it and you're a nerd on this stuff like I am, you see that some of those are all different fields. So some of them have what's your title? Is it Mr. Andrew Foxwell? Some of them just say Andrew Foxwell. Some of them ask for your middle name. Some of them ask for they have 5 address lines. Some of them have 3. So they're all over the place, and it's hard to do. The Congressional Management Foundation, after this report came out, got together a group of congressional vendors like the company that I work for, members of Congress and their staff, as well as people within the House internal technological structure, and said, what can we do to develop a way that all the information that comes in on these contact forms is the same? And I can say after 3, almost 4 years of working on this, we're probably at about 40%. Gives you an idea. A quote that came out of that is really important to read is, what is clear to almost anyone involved in congressional communications is that the current system of communications is inadequate and does not accomplish the goals of either side. So sort of a grim recommendation of where we are at with official congressional communications in 2008. So that's where we're at. Now let's talk a little bit more about where we are at as well as where we are now. The dialogue has deepened due to the advances in technology. And the first one I'll go from is the constituent resource management. So that's a tool that every office, I was talking to a young gentleman over here who worked on a constituent resource management tool in Senator Gillibrand's office this summer. And you go on there, and it's a database of everything about a certain constituent. Those came around in the early 90s as a way to track everything that was coming into your office, whether it be email, phone calls, actual hard mail or a letter, etc. And they're a tool that is still very much in use today. In the mid-90s, congressional websites came in. They're a huge piece of what people are using, obviously, for their outreach, and that's where a lot of us go to reach our member of Congress. E-newsletters, so a broadcasting tool that many members use to speak to their constituents. You put a few pictures in there. Anybody subscribe to a congressional email newsletter? A couple people? 3? All right, that's good. That's good. I subscribe to, I wish I didn't subscribe to as many as I do. I shouldn't say that because we sell them, but they're still very relevant, and a lot of people use them because you can go on and say, I do want to hear from you, I want to hear what's going on, send me an email. Every once in a while, they'll let me know what's happening. Telephone town hall meetings are a big part of what we use in Congress currently. Anybody been in a telephone town hall meeting that you got called from a member of Congress? Anyone? No one has. That's surprising. These are really popular since 2006 when they came into Congress. And you basically, the member can get on and call 50 to 100 to 200,000 people at a time in their district or their state and say, hi, this is Congressman John Smith. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Press *3 to ask me a question. And you can ask a question and interact. It's a way to reach a lot of people from just using technology. Social networking, of course, a big part of what we'll get into talk about. In 2006 really was when it came in. A little side note on the social networking is when I worked in the 111th Congress, you have to have an official page that says Congressman John Smith, and that's your official Facebook page, and you have to have a campaign page, John Smith for Congress. And when I told someone that I understood that you had to have two separate pages from Facebook in 2006, they said, we think you might be the only person that understands that. So this is where we were at in 2006. And those of us that love the glossy mail pieces that we get from members of Congress will love the next piece that we use a lot now, which are online advertisements. So you see a web ad that says, I'm here for you, click here to ask me a question or let me know how I can help. And those have really become a big part of technology within the dialogue. So this is where we're at now. Congress is at an all-time approval low. Voter distrust is at an all-time high. People don't feel comfortable in their government. They don't feel that they have a stake in it. And it's unfortunate that even members themselves are making fun of the institution, which discredits it even further. So there's a lot of distrust. People like to create websites like slowclapforcongress.com, which, as you can see, is a crowdsourced site that says for your leadership maturity and your inspiring ability to perform the basic duties of your job, we applaud you. And I'll give you an example here. It's just too funny not to show, I'm sorry. So this site, so this site got some unbelievable amount of numbers. Whoops. No, there we go. I think they have something like over 1,000 user-submitted videos. Imagine 1,000 people going online to record themselves slow clapping for Congress. Sort of the state that we're at. So some of the takeaways, the majority of Americans distrust Congress. They think some really think our legislative branch is ineffective. We all write letters, we do things, and seemingly nothing's really changing. Of course, you can't talk about technology in Congress and politics without mentioning the 24-hour news cycle that so many of us think about all the time, that really congests that exchange of real dialogue back and forth. And if those of you that have heard of The Filter Bubble by Eli Pariser, who wrote a book called The Filter Bubble, which his idea is that the filter bubble prevents the development of fair, unbiased opinions because search engines and social networks are only showing us things that we agree with. So they're picking our destiny for us, is the theory. Now, some people I know subscribe to this and some people don't, but it's an interesting one to bring up when you're speaking about real dialogue and what's going on. So, oh my God. I'm just going to leave this up here, and I'm out. I'm just kidding. We're all done for. So let's give a little bit more hope. Now we're on the hope train of where we're going. I want to talk about technology that has come up in the 111th and 112th Congress. As a side note, the 112th Congress has been called by many people from all across the aisle the most transparent Congress in history. Some of you may agree with that. Many of you may disagree with that. But I want to talk about things that you might not even know about that are happening because there's been large strides that have been made. The first one is UCUT, which is a legislative input tool from citizens. So when Majority Leader Eric Cantor was the minority whip, he came up with a tool. His digital director is a good friend of mine, came up with a tool that said, we want to give the ability to citizens to submit ideas on things they would cut from the government. And if it got a certain number of votes, we'll bring it to the floor. Now, in the minority, you can't do that. Nothing can be brought to the floor because you don't have control of the floor, so they would just shoot it down. But now in the majority, this has become a reality. And input from citizens has been voted on the House floor. Now, whether you agree with this from a partisan angle or not, doesn't matter. The point is that you and I are influencing the process to say this is something I agree we could do better. America Speaking Out, which is an avatar-based petitioning service, that's another one that came actually from Minority Leader Boehner and now the Speaker Boehner. But I sort of think that the White House, with their new tool called We the People, anybody heard of We the People? Read about it all? Yeah. It has sort of taken this idea and made it 1,000 times better. Don't tell the Speaker's office that. But We the People basically says, if you sign on and get a petition and you get a certain number of signatures, we will issue an official response. So that's a really neat thing that's really talking about engagement with dialogue versus a broadcasting angle. So We the People is a big tool that the White House uses that I really think the Congress will adapt something similar in the future. In the 112th Congress, we actually do have open data. I'll touch on open data later because it's a big topic. They have both agreed that we need open data, both parties in the majority and the minority. This is something that actually not a lot of people know about, but behind closed doors, Minority Leader Pelosi and Majority Leader Cantor's offices have worked very closely on to bring open data to the House floor, and we'll get into that. But that's something that has happened in the 112th Congress. We have live streaming now, so those of you that are really want to keep an eye on Congress in real time, you can. And I make fun of it, but it's true. It's actually a very good tool. I mean, if you want, you can log on right now to House on a smartphone or a mobile device and log on to house.gov/live, and you can look at the floor and you can see what's going on. And one thing that if you do want to write into your members, especially your senators, on is they've basically refused this idea to a degree. So this is something that has to happen, I think, everywhere, because if we're going to actually have a democratic government, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you need to have open sources that you can look at. And of course, members responding via social media, etc., and emails, and again, online advertisements as well. So those are all things that came in these last Congresses. So let's get on the ideas train. I always been to many conferences on technology and politics where people sort of talk about how much things are terrible and they never actually give any ideas of what you could do to change it. So that's what I'm trying to do here. These are ideas as well that, being a practitioner in this, I have thought about and talked with and spoken with many people about, including members of Congress, of things we could do. Like I said, the firm I work for represents over 300 members of Congress, and in any given day I'm in Steny Hoyer's office, and then I'm walking into the Speaker's lobby, because it's about moving forward. It's not about the partisanship of it. So here's a few ideas. The first one is updated infrastructure. So if you don't have infrastructure that can bring in things from constituents and you don't have the capability, you're not going to have dialogue. The most recent examples I just took screenshots of from CNN Politics. President Obama goes up and says, we need to pass the debt limit right now. Websites crash. What are we doing? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how it's supposed to be. Little known fact that in a member office, including Senate offices, and some Senate offices have upgraded, but very few have, the number of voicemails that a member telephone can have is 200. 200. So as a former staffer, I can say I would hate checking 200 voicemails, but it's your job. So one of my first suggestion gets to that exact point. Unlimited voicemails. Those of us that are calling in and those of us that are writing in, when we want to go tell our members something, we can't be met with things that are dead ends, or we can't get to it. johnboehner.house.gov, server is too busy. Can't happen. So we should update and virtualize all of the servers. I used to work at a company in Minneapolis. I was a Windows Server engineer on virtualization. And for those of you that don't know virtualization, it's the idea that you're taking physical servers and putting them onto, condensing them and putting them onto less physical servers, basically in sort of a really complicated way that I'm not going to talk about. But it makes it a lot easier, and it's a lot more condensed. Also within server chat, talking about it, we should stabilize the failover server structure. So when a server fails, why not have the backup, which is called the failover server, ready to go? Makes sense. And make the incoming correspondence easier to obtain and process, which is something we talked about earlier. We want to be able to look at it quickly, know what's going on. If I know, if something's big is going on, the debt ceiling debate, this week in Congress, it's going to be the balanced budget amendment. But a member is going to walk back to their staff and say, how many letters or phone calls have we gotten on the debt limit? They're going to ask that question. And if you can't answer that quickly, that's an issue. Getting to the open data piece, you can see what I'm thinking here. More data, more information, creative people, improve transparency. So the idea of open data is taking everything that we get and everything that Congress is doing and putting it into an open structure that creative people can create things around as tools that we can look at for transparency. And I'll give some examples. In 2007, the Sunlight Foundation, which is another nonprofit transparency organization, said we should move to a non-structured, non-proprietary format. So offices are, and here's the key, empowered to have an open body. Some of my suggestions are things like hearings. Okay, why can't you search full text of hearings? Why can't you see videos of hearings? Why can't you search full text of speeches? You can, but it's not an open source. You can go on House Record right now, and I can search the word jobs on House Record, and it's a PDF that's about 50,000 megabytes or something. Why can't we have that in open data? Financial records, lobbying disclosures. This is not crazy stuff. This has happened actually in the city of Chicago, and I'll show you some examples as well. But they have now, when Rahm Emanuel became the mayor of Chicago, he said, I want anyone in the city at any time to be able to go on and see who has given money to that campaign, who are the lobbyists, and what bills they voted on all in one place so they can tie those things together. We have the ability to do this now within our representative democracy, and we as Americans deserve this. We do. So this is something we can do. And scheduling information. Imagine if we could go on and say, you know what, I really feel like my congressman, John Smith, love my John Smith name, John Smith, he hasn't been around my town lately. Maybe we're leaning the other way politically and he doesn't like talking to us as much, or he knows that when he holds a town hall meeting, a lot more of us from another party show up. Why can't we have scheduling information that pops up so that if I'm a developer, I can go on and develop an open source map that says, hey, and send it to the congressman and say, hey, congressman, where have you been? And give it to the newspapers. I know as a person that, in talking to many reporters, this is the kind of thing that they would use. And this is something to hold our people accountable that we need to be doing. So again, data, City of Chicago. And I also want to not gloss over the open data thing from Washington side. Data.gov is there, and President Obama has made that a priority. But he has taken things from Bureau of Labor Statistics and data sets that are good and they're interesting, but they're not legislative. So that's, I think, where it falls short a little bit. And you can see this is some examples from Chicago, but police stations, food inspections, things like that. The people, open source developers in Chicago are developing things around that. What if we could go on, this is an idea I thought of this morning as I was having coffee. What if you could go on and look at every ethical inquiry? We hear about it. You ever notice you hear about an ethical inquiry and then it passes and you're like, whatever happened to that guy? Does that actually do anything? That's something that we could use. So that's another example. Idea 3, improve customer service orientation. This is sort of what I think is happening in Congress. I'm a cartoon guy, especially in the New Yorker. Bad news is our customers hate us. The good news, we have a lot fewer customers than we used to. So sort of where we're at, I think, a little bit with our democracy. So going on the improving customer service idea, this is a typical house office structure. And in my opinion, I checked this with people that work in the house. I used to work in the house. This is sort of how it's structured right now, I would say, in hierarchy. So let me point out where the current customer service representatives are. The people that are supposed to serve you and me. I'm going to hop over here. I'm going to speak really loud. Okay, so legislative correspondent. This person's job, I would say on average, they're 23, 22, 23, recent college graduate, and their job is to answer every single piece of correspondence that comes in from an office. And sometimes they work regularly with the legislative people to say, what should I say on this letter? What do you think? But they're the person that's responsible for getting back to you. On the other side, caseworkers. These are people that if I have an issue with Social Security or the veterans benefits or something like that, you can call your member of Congress. And this is actually a huge part of what we pay Congress to do is help us. Maybe with my passport, I can't get my passport quick enough. These are the people that are meant to do it. And they're on average, I would say, probably average age, I'm not exaggerating, maybe 70. These are the people we've tasked with taking care of us. That's an issue. So, vision. It's an improved customer service orientation. My idea is to enlarge the number of people that do customer service and create basically an office, or a sub-office of the office called Constituent Service Representatives. Those of you that have read the book by the CEO of Zappos, anybody? Yeah, awesome book. And he talks about how his number one priority was to give customer service representatives, make them higher in an office, give them a better salary, and let them know that if they spent 5 hours on the phone with a customer making them happy, they could have been talking about who knows what. But if they were happy with the shoes that you bought afterwards, that's good. And that's what we need to be talking about here. So improving the customer service orientation. I want to add, too, that these people should have an extreme high level of software competency, which is a challenge that a lot of people go through. So if your job is to learn a software to answer to constituents, you should know how to use that like the back of your hand. And that's a big part of it. And my other idea would be to spend 50% of their time in the field using the constituent management technology. So technologically, we're at a place now where we have tablets, we have mobile devices that we carry around with us wherever we go. Why can't I spend, if my job is to hear from you, 50% of my time out and about, talking to people, holding meetings? A lot of times people in offices, in district offices, so in the state office or in the DC office, they'll say, oh, well, come see us. Why don't you go see them? You can take technology with you. You can record it. You can take notes, put it right in the system. Pretty easy, to me at least. My fourth idea is to create a digital director position in every office. One thing that's really has inspired me to think about this is about 4 years ago, a friend of mine said to a member, he said, sir, why would you have a broken lamp in your office? Would you have like a couch that slumps? No, you wouldn't have that. That would be ridiculous. How many people visit your office on an average day? And he said, oh, probably about 10 constituents and he's speaking about his DC office, 10 constituents. And he said, do you know how many people look at your website every day? He said, no, I'm not sure. And I, as the vendor, knew because we represented them. I said, you know, sir, honestly, it's about 300 unique people a day. So why would you have a broken link on your website? Doesn't make any sense. Creating a digital director position in every office is the kind of thing that's what we could fix. The responsibilities of that person, monitoring social media channels, obviously, seeing what people are talking about and responding to them. Update and supervise all online presence. So, you know, any other things that are outside of social media that they could update. They would work as part of the constituent team to serve the digital constituents. I'm a digital constituent. I would consider myself in that camp. I communicate entirely with my representative in, well, it's Eleanor Holmes Norton, but I communicate with her in a purely digital format. I don't write her a letter, is what I'm saying. And I want someone who gets digital to be responding to me on digital. If I write on her Facebook wall, I want her to respond to me. If I tweeted her, I want her to be genuine and respond to me as well. And I expect that. And ensure, of course, again, all of the legislation and speeches is online. So the point I was talking about earlier with open data, this could be a part of the digital director idea. So it could be like this, and then they could have their own team even. This is an idea, and they would reside in the constituent service representative area. The fifth idea, anybody need a break? I know I'm doing a lot of talking. Sorry about that. We need more iced tea? Question, yes.
What about just merging those constituent representatives, but make them all digital, rather than having the digital build be a separate team? Your last slide.
Yes, you could. Great idea. I'm thinking immediate, though, that eventually you could when more digital people get into that idea or get into that realm. But right now you are dealing with people that have been in offices 30 to 40 years, not kidding, that aren't going to embrace technology. So some of those people they're going to have to be separate initially. But I mean, eventually, of course. I completely agree with you. It's a really good point. The fifth idea, reworking the relationship digitally with government agencies. Okay, this is my favorite part. Government agency needs to tell Congress about changes in a law or updates to benefits that their constituents might get. Maybe Congress needs to ask someone in a federal agency a question. Anybody want to guess how they communicate currently? We're talking about multi-million dollar, billion-dollar federal agencies and the legislative branch that are communicating via Microsoft Outlook. If you have a PDF, this is literally, I almost died when this happened to me. I was press secretary, I was sitting there, and somebody called me from the Social Security Administration, and they said, "Hi, this is Bob from the Social Security Administration. Do you have an email address that we could send you some materials on?" I was like, "Yeah," I gave my email address. About 30 minutes later, came in, I'm not kidding, 6 30-page documents that me, at the time, I was supposed to read through and figure out, I guess. That's an issue. So if your job is to help and connect agencies through constituent service, why are they still behind on digital communications? Right now, the number one tool that federal agencies use that's really hot, I was just at a conference with federal agency people doing digital last week, 2 weeks ago, and they use email newsletters. That's their number one tool. And one of the questions in the audience was, we just got on Facebook, and there's a lot of people talking to us that we don't want to talk to, so how do we get rid of them? So my idea of really reworking that digital relationship is you could have things going back and forth. I don't know, maybe you could create an internal network that you could share documents on. I'm not talking about Microsoft SharePoint, but something similar that you could have documents on, you can understand, you could have a representative, you could have a digital representative for each region of the country and that kind of thing that says, yeah, we'll help you with this, and I could send an email to him and say, or, I could tweet at him and say, what do you think about this? This constituent has a question. Or share, imagine being able to ask a question on a member's Facebook wall and being able to share that question on the Social Security Administration's website and getting an answer. That's sort of what I'm talking about. My sixth idea, member information dashboards. This was a great Creative Commons photo of somebody being very overwhelmed. I just searched overwhelmed. I think it's pretty good. Members are a lot like this. They're very busy people. Obviously, they have a ton to do. They have a lot of constituents to represent. The average congressional office represents about 600,000 people. And of course, in a state office, it's a lot more. Excuse me, in a Senate office, it's a lot more. But we could basically have ways to boil down that information into information dashboards. So what I was talking about before, asking that question, how many people have called in on this debt ceiling vote or the balanced budget amendment, or how many people have emailed? You could push vendors like us, and we're working on this, and hopefully others are as well, to provide the informative dashboards so that they could consume it on their iPad, or they could look at it on a piece of paper and walk around and say every day, oh, this is how many people are talking to me, and about a certain idea. People in digital are really starting to invest heavily in infographics now. I love infographics. It's an easy way for me to get information and understand information. So I would say using infographics in this would be a great idea, using pictures and colors. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but if you can look at it easily and quickly, that would be one thing that's wonderful. And the final idea, engagement versus broadcasting. So right now, there are many members that broadcast their message. They have a press release that says, John Smith supports the American Jobs Act. This is from the White House. This isn't to hit on the White House, but this is an extreme example of broadcasting. They sent out, I think, 150 emails to every single reporter on their press list, telling them every person that supported the American Jobs Act. I get the idea behind it, but it's not helpful when we're actually trying to bring engagement in. And Congress is guilty of this as well. So there's greater risk in the engagement because it requires the member themselves to be genuine and be on the medium. My former boss wanted to always be on the medium himself. And he wanted to be responding via Facebook and via Twitter to people that asked him questions. And at times, as a press person, that's kind of scary. But there's greater risk. But that's a good risk because that's going to enhance the democracy and make every single point of customer service and interaction more genuine. So here's a summary of the ideas that I have for now of things that we could do that I have seen that could work. And we'll let that be. So what can we do? I'm going to give you guys a little bit of, here's the things we can do. First of all, follow your member on social media tools. Even if you don't like Bob Corker, like him on Facebook. Because you can ask him questions on that medium and have it be a more direct democracy to see what's going on. I mean, I log into Facebook like 5 times a day. I'm not afraid to say that. That's fine. And so if I'm on there, that's where I'm getting my news. Now I have the ability to see what my friends are reading. I have the ability to see what my member of Congress is doing at that time, and that's important to me. And that's really cool. So follow your members even if you don't agree with them necessarily. Find new ways to engage. So there's a whole host of things that you guys are going to come up with that I didn't come up with, maybe in this roundtable discussion too. But there's things I haven't even thought of, and Washington hasn't thought of, and no one has thought of in terms of engaging members of Congress of what we're doing. So figuring those out, maybe it's not Google+, but what is it? What is the next? Maybe it's not a social network even, but what is another way to engage? Hold your member accountable, of course, and ask them to embrace open data and say, I want to be able to know what's going on with you. And this is changing, and we're getting there, so this isn't a crazy request. And on the last one, I was thinking about calling it a connectpreneur. Oh, those were crazy, but we've all grown up, many of us, with social networks, and seeing the connections that we have in real time and being able to speak to everyone as quickly as possible. So what are the other ways that you can connect with your member? It sort of goes along to the engagement piece, but what are the other ways you can connect and make that web more powerful to bring people there. So here's a quote from Mike. Maybe you guys know Mike. Mike wrote on the project dialogue page, which I thought was really, really great quote. It needs both sides to give equal time, understanding, and effort. So this is us, as well as the members of Congress. They have to give more time, understanding, and effort to what we're doing. And a quote from Alan Giebert, who I confess is my future father-in-law, who's a syndicated columnist, but he wrote something I thought last week I couldn't not put in the presentation. But it's a little wonder the extremists have seen the process. We've checked out. We can't have a participatory democracy if we don't participate. So it's on us as much as it's on members of Congress. So now we can get to questions and look at Matthew Lesko. Oh, there's questions. So now we're going to do the other thing? Okay.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Everyone, we are going to take a few minutes to have some small table round discussions. There are prompts in the center of your table. And if you could please take a few minutes as a group to reflect on the presentation and any questions you may have. There are also feedback forms at each table. We would greatly appreciate your comments, and these forms can either be left at your table or turned into the basket on the right side as you exit. And after a brief break, we will be back for Q&A with Andrew.
Should we maybe applaud for Andrew?
Yeah. Should we go? We good? Somebody just asked in the back, awesome question. I want to address it really quickly. How do I know which page is the official page? Which is a good question. Usually it says Representative John Smith or Senator John Smith. And then if you look in the info section, it'll have their website as smith.house.gov or smith.senate.gov. But it actually is a project that I'm working on right now with the Committee on House Administration and in the Senate as well as Facebook to try to figure out how we can bring those two together, because I think it's actually really confusing and it's a really good point to bring up. So you bring them together and maybe the political updates from the John Smith for Congress Facebook page are in red, but it's all under John Smith, and then the other ones are in another color or something. These are sort of the things we're thinking about, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of challenges around that because people don't want to be saying, I just introduced HR 45-9 to save the whales, and then next the update be like, give $5 to save the whales. It's my campaign. So anyway. Yes?
So here at a university, and I'm thinking about the digital information building that could work in all these offices, training the people that are going to do the digital representatives. And I think there's an assumption that the younger generation are just naturally confident in these things, and while they may be more than older generations, it isn't something that they just, I think there's still training and education that needs to be done. And that's not something that universities right now are really equipped to do. There's an assumption that these aren't things that you need to learn how to do. There aren't necessarily best practices that you can be taught, but it's just anybody can have a Facebook, anybody can tweet, and we all know how to do it equally well. I guess what I'm trying to get to is how do you see maybe universities playing a role in helping empower their students to be prepared to take on these sorts of jobs when they're ready?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question so the camera can hear it, sort of how do universities and colleges prepare students to become digital sort of soldiers, I guess is the term. Digital soldiers, be an awesome band name as a side note. Sitting on the board at St. Olaf College, which is an honor that I have, this is something we talk about a lot. And one thing that we've done is there's always the problem of people at, say, university or college, everyone leaves and they don't know how to balance a checkbook, or that's an issue that comes up a lot. And I do think, along with probably a lot of you, that digital competency is an issue that's as high as balancing a checkbook. So, what we've done at St. Olaf, and this is just personal experience, is create a thing called the Main Street Project, which is a project that brings people from offices across campus to do things like financial management from the econ department, psychological health from the psych department, digital competency from the IT department, and bringing it together so that every student that leaves has at least gone through those courses that they're not you have to go to them, and they take place usually in the evenings for like a half an hour, and they go for 6 months or something, maybe not even that long. But we're just starting them. So that's one way I could see it being addressed, but I completely agree with you that it's not, you can't just assume that people know. I mean, I have a lot of friends that just make fun of me, and they're like, whatever, on Twitter, they're like, you must have said something. I'm like, yeah, it did. That's where I get like all my news. And so there is a big part of that I think comes up with it not just, we're past the stage of it just being like an idea or something cool. It's really part of taking part in our democracy and just being a citizen, I think, now in America. And yes.
Along with that question, something I've been thinking about with regards to this topic is how do we make sure we aren't outing one part of the population that can't, like my dad would have no idea what Facebook is or no idea how to log on, and he thinks it's for stalkers and that's about it. And so for something like this that could be an effective tool for someone who complains quite a lot about the government, how do we make sure that we're not taking that older population and telling them your voice may not count as much because you don't know how to use these methods, whereas our voices can count more because we may tweet and use Facebook and use all these other media methods?
Yeah, it's a good question. The question for the camera is, how do we make sure we're not ignoring people that aren't on the digital space in reference to advocacy? I mean, I think that social media is an addition to the mix. It's not one being better than the other. It's an addition, and it's something that we can use, and Congress needs to get better at. But for those people that aren't using digital tools, to write in letters, I mean, a letter is still that still holds a lot of weight. And a meeting, there's a study that came out from the Congressional Management Foundation about 3 months ago that said, in surveying staff in the House and Senate, that the number one thing that influences them is a meeting in person. And a lot of people don't realize, I mean, you can call your member office and say, hey, I have a friend and I, we want you to, you could be like 2 people, and you could be like, we want a meeting. And they'll take the meeting. A lot of times they're begging for people to, not begging, but a lot of times there's time that's open, and that's their job. So I think it's really an addition to it, social media is, versus one being better than the other. I'm biased because this is the business that I work in, and it's something that's important, I think, because there's a lot of work to do. But it doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that other mediums are just as important. Yeah. In the back, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thanks. This is great. I think they're all great ideas. I worked in the federal government for a couple of years and a lobbying group in the D.C. area.
Nice.
I think, like Fizan at our table here said, this is all very reasonable. I think it really should be pushed hard for. My question is similar to Elizabeth's, though, just building on it a little bit. In terms of innovation in the face-to-face democratic realm, and how this is kind of a both-and thing, perhaps, or a both-and question. For example, there's a neat thing that the Dutch government does, where they call together a group of citizens to talk about a controversial issue. It's sanctioned by the government, but they apparently push to make sure it's a variety of views represented. They talk and have experts for a number of days, do a big press release at the end that says, this is what this. I think they try to do random choice of people to get on there, what this group thinks. And so I guess the question is what you see in terms of some of these face-to-face innovations as well, and the room for them.
Sure. I mean, face-to-face innovations and room for those. It's an interesting idea that in Denmark, I mean, that's Netherlands, excuse me. Thank you. Fiance always have my back. It sounds like a government-sponsored focus group. That's a good idea. I mean, we could have that if we demand it. I mean, none of this is going to change unless we demand that it needs to change. The face-to-face innovations that I have seen currently, and I'll speak about it in reference to technology just as an idea quickly, as I've seen members having constituents submit YouTube video questions and then responding to them via YouTube or via Vimeo or something. I mean, video to video. Senator Chris Coons is a big fan of this from Delaware. A lot of people have done a lot of stuff have used him as an example. So that's one way that is face-to-face but not face-to-face. But, I mean, the meeting thing, there's a lot of room for innovation in that, and I think, using tools like the CRM on a tablet or something like that to be able to enter in the information, that would enhance the face-to-face thing. I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that more. That's a great question. There's always room for face-to-face innovation. One thing a slide I took out was member-to-member communication, because if you talk to members that have been around forever, they'll say they just say it's not what it used to be, and it's because they've been rewarded for separating themselves. And there's no incentive to talk to someone else because partisanship rules, and it's not sexy for John Boehner to be talking to Nancy Pelosi, when in reality they talk all the time behind closed doors, but nobody even knows about it. Not all the time, but I mean on a regular basis. So there's a lot of member-to-member face-to-face communication that I think can be enhanced too. I don't know. Do you want to follow up on that question? I mean, feel free.
Well, maybe I can chat with you a little bit afterwards too. I don't want to, since I know we don't have too much.
I'm totally open for ideas on stuff like that.
Others have questions. Yeah, I know there's some cool stuff. I got to do a big kind of literature review on it last year, and things like this America Speaks organization where they have big town halls around the states, and this actually does incorporate technology. So there's like everyone has a little voting device where you can see the results as people are talking, but deliberative democracy forums are an interesting thing. Deliberative polling. There's kind of a lot of possibilities, I think, but the basic premise that I come from is that people, and this is some of what I found in my research, that people aren't talking to those with different views face-to-face in meaningful ways. They aren't, short and just reinforcing their own opinion. So citizen debates, I think, are an interesting possibility. I think there's a lot of potential.
Yes, I agree with you. Citizen debates could be a big thing. I mean, getting not teletown halls, but town halls, in-person town halls. The Republicans really did a lot of in the 111th Congress, but and there can be a lot more of those. I agree with you. And the voting thing in real time, I mean, that's a good idea.
Twitter town hall.
Oh, yeah, another great idea. Twitter town halls is another thing that people are doing, too, where they're holding, the White House has done this as well. They're holding hours on Twitter that an expert, you can talk to Austin Goldsby and say, what's going on? I still don't have a job. When's the economy going to turn around? And you can ask them that on Twitter, and it's office hours essentially on Twitter. So that's another idea. But yeah, cool. Yes.
I want to ask about, so one thing that you talked about is the balance between both sides putting up the same kind of time and effort in terms of being able to create some kind of constructive, effective dialogue, which I think is a good point. And I do think a vast majority of Americans have done some checking out as they become disenchanted with things recently. And I see how a lot of the systemic improvements you're talking about could really help make that participation, that effort easier and at least more sensible. There's one thing I want to ask about and just see if maybe you're on this track already or if you have ideas for this, where by the same token of that, people are constrained for time, particularly when you look at people who are in lower socioeconomic strata. They're struggling to work two jobs to make ends then to ask them, well, but you really need to participate too. You need to get on and write letters to your congressman,
Yeah.
and they don't have time to do that.
Right.
Are there things that, I'm envisioning an ideal world where I could do something like, I just moved here 3 months ago, where I could go, here's my address, click, and what it brings up is on the side of my Facebook page, here are your representatives, and here are your senators, and here's a little, which of these options would you like, this newsfeed, that, such that you could really streamline the process of, instead of asking people, well, there are great mechanisms out there once you go find who these people are, once you figure out their system.
Yeah, making it easier.
Make it an automatic click. Here are the schedule and how to participate. Here are the people to talk to. Here are the ways. Are there any sort of automated, for the customer, for the constituents, sort of one-click solutions that we're moving towards?
Yeah.
Anything along those lines?
That's a good idea. And that's sort of what we started to get at with online advertisements, which is, I'm here for you. I'm holding office hours in your city at the Target tomorrow from 11 to 3 or something, right? That's sort of what we're getting at a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it is having that information be available. And having it on Facebook, that's a great idea. To have it be a democracy thing. One thing I will say that I've, sort of been thinking about is we have the ability to look at everything via technology, update people, etc. Why can't we have a ability to say, I agree with this piece of legislation and send it in and be verified that I'm a constituent in your district? Instead of writing in a letter, maybe it's tying it to a specific piece of legislation immediately so that you go to the floor and say, I have an idea of, I'm here with this bill today and I already have 3,000 people in my district that have basically signed on to it with me. That's one idea. That's where we could go. Another idea?
I hate to cut this off. These are all excellent questions, and maybe Andrew will stick around for a
Sure.
little bit afterwards. Thank you so much again for a wonderful
Thank you very much, everyone.